Now back to our famous or favorite subject. You remember we stopped just before lunch, and we were talking about who is doing what on public sector. On this session is also about processing of a project. Now we are really getting into the real stuff, and we will together look at the process, the documents. I will use a lot of jargon, then we will look very smart, because these are things that people speak about on initially. When first time you hear about it, you say, "Ooh, what is this thing?" And then if we could demystify some of the terminology, it will help a lot. And what I will try to do, it's to identify for each step what you are meant to do and with whom, so that we make it very practical for you, maybe next week or whenever you could process a transaction. After this session, coffee will come, because you need a lot of caffeine for the last session 5, and then we'll speak about modeling. For the modeling, what we will be doing during the coffee break, we will ask you if you could kindly download from wherever. Elodie will explain.
Yeah, we will explain at the end of the session.
Yeah, there will be Excel files to be downloaded, and the suggestion will be that you will team up, let's say 2 together, if you each have one computer, and there will be a little exercise at the end, if you are interested, and we will compare notes, having used the model, knowing that this model that you will be given, you could tweak it to suit your own requirements, because I try to make it so in such a way that there isn't like hidden sales, macros, I mean whatever, make it very complicated later to use. So now, general principle about project development, and we are here for any kind of project finance. I will though spend a bit more time on what is particular for renewable, and you will see through the timeline what is different. Now, with this chart, I try to reconcile the timeline with the main steps you are possibly already familiar with when you develop your project. Then, depending on what is your main focus, could it be monitoring, then when the project is signed here, or could it be the more commercial sailing part, then you come very early. You might step in at the various steps of the timeline. Then initially, as a bank, your first step will be to get into a mandate letter. Then among you who sign mandate letter with clients and who don't, then either you do one or the other. Then let's ask, then who is familiar with mandate letter? One? Okay, then it means that this confirms the trick. Because IFC, EBRD, not even EIB, and Asian development banks are slightly abusing of their position by doing the following. In fact, they ask clients, prospects, to enter an agreement solely with them in order to agree on the terms and conditions under which they will be developing that. And the trick will be for these guys, not that I would like to put Usama on the spot, but very often would they try to get all the fees extracted from the client, and they would like to control the due diligence at their, say, how to put it, in a way they would like the project to go. I'll give you an example. IFC has its own environmental rules. Obviously, they would like the due diligence to make sure that the project comply. However, you might have your own requirements, because in your country you have specific attention to one aspect or the other. Unfortunately, if IFC drives the process and entered before in a mandate letter, you might end up not having any consultant or support to do the bit you want. Then there is one thing which is about all the work, the efforts of putting that together. And obviously, whoever drives it gets the project towards the way this entity would like to structure it. Then the type of thing we will suggest you to do, it's very early in the process when you meet with a project developer or whoever, to ask to be part of the mandate letter, to say, look, we will establish a partnership with other lender, and in that document, we will determine what are the steps towards the signing. Who is paying for the due diligence? Who is building the model? What type of reporting you will have? And there will be some payment, because internally you will be paid as well as a lender for processing the deal. There will be also one obligation in the mandate letter, that if the client pull out for whatever reasons, like they want to see a competitor, they will have to pay a penalty or a fee. So this document obviously is very critical upfront, but many IFIs don't want to share it with local lenders. Could it be national bank or multilaterals? Then here, very interesting stuff. I could share with you tomorrow a template with everything, because we were having pre-template preset with all the conditions, so that you could squeeze a little bit of money out of it, which is one thing, but more importantly, you could drive the due diligence process so that it complies with your requirements, whatever you may want to look at throughout the process. Then with this mandate letter in hands, you will in fact perform your due diligence. Then out of the due diligence, you will define a kind of methodology whereby you will somehow build your financial model, an assessment book on the term sheet, which is that one you must be familiar with, the document where you list all your requirements, and we will see how we structure it for our renewable project. Then now, there are things that are specific to, this is kind of fancy animation. This is the maximum I could be doing, but this is nice. Thanks to Elodie, by the way. Then now, in our due diligence, there will be things that are general, like for any kind of infrastructure, others power, other renewable. Then we go down in terms of level of detail. Then very much aligned with the risk that we've foreseen. Then there is a construction risk. Then you will look in your due diligence at all the other risks. You remember financial risk, convertibility, repatriation, interest, political risk. Then you will have a section whereby you will assess the market on the offtake, and then the resource assessment on competitiveness. This due diligence process will be organized locally among all the banks, because at the end of the day, you must agree that it's very important that one bank doesn't steer the boat in its direction if you have more concern about one or the other. To illustrate it, you remember our table. In that table whereby we define per technology the P75, 90. Imagine a situation where internally you are bound to use P90 for, let's say, offshore wind, but the other bank is using P75. Then you will have a discrepancy, because you are meant ultimately to agree on the same project, but you are not using the same scenario. Then very important upfront to agree among you on what you will be doing. The second is in terms of methodologies and to agree on how you will design your financial model. Then you should then agree on the production forecast on probabilistic scenario. Again, here you will find lenders much more aggressive than others. Very important among all of you to just agree on what type of risk you are ready to take. Some lender will say, oh, you know what, 1 year historical is enough for me. Others will say, no, it's 5 years for me. So again, here, it's very important to work on the same type of assumption. The same for the mapping of risk and on the design of the scenario, because otherwise you will end up with different conclusions. The thing is that the more data you have, it comes back to what the gentleman was saying, the more precise you would be. If you take only 1 year, many people will say, oh, that year was particularly good or bad, and then you end up possibly with a different outcome in the way you generate your revenues. Then it's more a level of certainty on maybe that given year was very low or very high. Then it's difficult. I mean, for hydro, it will be obvious because it's so volatile that you take a huge risk. You can't say that 1 year will give you an average. But then it's really a matter of agreeing among yourselves on what scenario you are defining. And then we end up with a term sheet. And then there was this question, how do you work among lenders? And then usually, in fact, to answer that question, the term sheet will be split in 2 parts. You will have one common for all lenders, and this one is called usually common terms agreement, whereby there is the obvious who is a lender, what are the, not even the interest rates, they could come in the second section, but there will be the covenant, very important, and you know these are the list of obligations that fall under the borrower's responsibility. You must have the same set of covenant as much as you can, because otherwise what will happen is that one lender might create a default while the other has no default. Then if you don't have the same covenant, you lend to the same project, but one lender will perceive it as not being performing, while the other consider it as being good. Then that one won't work. Then you have to get common terms agreement, and then you have to make sure that whatever is specific to each lender is limited to the maximum, maybe interest rate, tenor, but try to avoid covenants being imposed by one party, because there will be usually what we call cross default, where one lender cross defaults the other, but then you end up being totally hostage of one situation, you see. Then very important to structure upfront your legal documents with a common part, CTA, that will then evolve in a common terms agreement on a master loan, I would say, and a section for each lender, but limited to really the bare minimum, possibly interest rate, tenor, but in a way where everybody is very transparent. Then it's obviously the best way. Now, to speak from my experience, when again I was with Alstom, we were having an IPP in China with Chinese lenders. Then we were having, in a not very transparent way, 2 loan agreements. One was called onshore, the other one was called offshore, so that we could have a direct connection with the French lenders. Then, not that I recommend it, but in the real life, it's very often happening, unfortunately. But it's a situation you must try to avoid, because otherwise you create too much discrepancies among people. Now, we spoke about one big part of our structuring, which is the process, the timeline. Now, for our renewable energy project, I guess we could conclude from this morning that the cash waterfall is of the essence, in a sense that this is where you will be driving all the flows of funding or money on cash that will go to one or the other. Then, what is a cash waterfall? In fact, it's a way for you to structure your payment on, like having a hierarchy among whoever is meant to receive funding. Not only the lenders, you will see that other, I would say, accounts have a priority over lenders, such as the debt service reserve account, possibly accounts for maintenance. Then there will be a hierarchical order that tells you, look, when there is $1 available, it goes that way. And as you remember from this morning, our renewable energy project have a lot of cash, excess cash available. Then it's not like a situation where you could say upfront, 10 years in advance, I know which revenues I will be having, and I could already pre-allocate. No, you have to structure a mechanism, a legal one, whereby you tell people, whenever the cash arrive, I will allocate it to one or the other. Then this will be about allocating then the excess cash flow. And then this is where you will have your subordination. You remember, two subordination. Obviously, this one is not the quote-unquote legal one, where you speak about what happened in case of bankruptcy. Then it's not about access to security. It's about who is subordinated with regard to the access to cash. And obviously, we are talking about situation where there is no default. Then this is where junior facility will kicks in. And this is where the blending will be then reflected. Then if you have somebody that offers you a first loss, this first loss will be legally covenanted in the cash waterfall. And as a master of this cash waterfall, this is where you will control the return on equity. Then critical for any project, but even more so, if I may say, for renewable energy projects. What are we trying to do here? As I said, you will put a hierarchy, and this is yours. And again, very important to remember, the mandate letter gives you control, and whoever controls the mandate letter will control that. Because the other lenders surely will have their say. They will sign the loan agreement ultimately. But as you could imagine, if you have driven the due diligence, you know exactly why each flow go to a certain pocket or the other. So now, when the cash is being allocated, obviously that bit is somehow mandatory. Then you will have your operating expenses, the fees, whatever money should go on these various accounts. It's the one about O&M and anything about operation and maintenance. So what is happening, you might remember, I was possibly a bit too quick, sorry for that. You remember when we spoke about O&M, we said that there was ways of mitigating the risk of non-performance. And one is to create a small account where you put money aside. And you could tell your sponsor, look, you know what, you are a bit short in terms of competence or in terms of amounts when you maintain your solar panels. Could you please put, let's say, 2% aside, just in case there is a breakdown in the equipment? Then this is a way of addressing O&M. In fact, amortization will come as a kind of accounting. Then you're right to say that when we will discount in our model and calculate the way the performance goes down, you're right, we will assume that there is a certain number of panels that break down. Unfortunately, it might be, in average, 1% efficiency is lost. And to try to do as much as we can to maintain the asset, we will have this account. Now, you're right to say, Mustafa, that in solar, no need to put 10%, because you know that your performance will go down, and the idea is not to replace one panel after the other. It's more...
There's anyway amortization somewhere.
You're right. Yeah, sure. Because amortization will match, hopefully, the loan repayment. No, you're right. Yeah.
If I may, just to add to the point on amortization. So amortization is a non-cash. So basically, you pay, and it's an accounting principle.
Yeah.
Whereas here in MRA, I think in renewables, sometimes you have inverters to replace after
For
10
example,
years.
yeah.
So this is a cash cost, and you need to put cash aside in a reserve account.
Exactly.
One last point to add. I think from the little experience I have, I've seen that the DSRA funding and MRI funding sometimes are not senior to the mandatory senior loan repayment.
They will be, because they are funded before you
this
start.
Is prepayment.
Yes.
Prepayment. Okay.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yes.
I thought it was the.
No. A lot of energy went into
so
that
this
slide.
Is prepayment.
It's like,
okay.
oof. It's tricky. They're tricky, Usama, than even worse than James. I mean, I have to be careful here. I've got these two. But just to say that back to Mustafa and Usama's point, this account is particularly, I would say, important for renewable because it's a bit like the Wild West. You have sponsors who have very little expertise. I mean, you are not dealing with the Suez, the AES, the EDF, the whoever. Here you are dealing with possibly entities who first have separate legal entities for every project, and that could disappear the day after tomorrow. Then to make sure that they put aside enough money, because they won't come with further equity. It's a way of securing your project. And now comes the question, I have my extra dollar still here, and then how will I allocate it to the various provider of funding? Then here there is this idea of choosing, and this is where the junior people will tell you, oh, you know what, I want to come first before you senior lender, because at the end of the day you are senior, then you got all the privilege of seniority, but why then should you get a prepayment? And obviously this is where the tension will appear among lenders, because here one day junior lenders would like to be repaid, but these guys, they are a bit illegitimate in the sense that they agreed on a loan, they structure the debt accordingly. Why should they get a prepayment? Then there will be a lot of tension here to agree on what interest rate, what level, what amount is shared between these guys. Then comes the cash sweep, when you really remove everything before you leave this nasty sponsor getting their return, waiting as much as you could. Huh? I hope it's not.
Who is receiving the cash sweep?
This will be back to these guys. Huh? Then you will really clean it, clean the house before nasty guys got it. Yeah. Because otherwise you are dead. Then that one will be legally like pre-set in your legal docs, first in your term sheet, and then in your loan agreement. But it's very important, as you could imagine, to have a CTA, because if you don't have common terms and agreement among all lenders, these things make no sense, because you have then one bank that got its own cash sweep, and the other one its own way of allocating the money, but it was the same dollar. Then it can't work. Hence, back to this idea of structuring or processing your deal in such a way that you put everything around the same, around same table under CTA, and very, very few clauses go into the specific loan agreements. And I mentioned, as I said, interest rate, which is normal. It could be also other requirements, environmental requirements. Then if we speak about AFD might have its own gender requirement, which is different from others. And there could be specific requirements, but as limited as one could, so that you avoid a situation where you have discrepancies, in particular in this cash waterfall. The model that we will be seeing is a bit limited in the way we look at it, but the idea will be that ultimately your financial model will be representing every steps by putting a hierarchy in the way the dollars or the income is allocated. Then here, these are all our various facilities, and as we see here come the face of our nasty sponsors, because what you will ask them not to do, because this is always the question, they have all the freedom because they own the company, but then there will be what we call negative covenants, whereby you tell them, look, you don't take money out unless, and then you will have a list of conditions whereby you try to steer or to control the return, so to avoid a situation whereby they extract too much cash early in the process, knowing that in our case, back to renewable project, equity is very limited. Then it's even more of an issue for us than it is for other infrastructure projects. Then I guess this was the last slide, was it? Oh, yes. Then we have then seen how we process a deal over time with the various steps. If you're interested tomorrow, we could spend a bit of time on one step or the other, knowing that now we will work together on a financial model. Then the idea will be, then this is Elodie.
Yes, sure.
Elodie.
So after the coffee break, we've shared with you in the shared folder some exercises in day 2. So there are 3 Excel files, and the number 3 is the one you will use to do your calculation, to play a little bit around. So please download this slide. Don't work on it directly, otherwise it's going to be a mess with everyone working on the same one. So download it. And there is also a Word file explaining the guidelines, what you will need to do. Again, download this file, and then you can work in small groups or peers, like you're seated now. If you're 3, maybe try to join someone who is alone, and then we'll guide you during the session, of course. But we'll go back to this after the coffee break and explain you in a bit more detail the exercise.